Happy Wellbeing Wednesday if you're watching it on a Wednesday. Thank you for having me back, everybody. Yeah, I wanted to talk about this week a topic that I think that it's like an easy one for sometimes to miss or not reflect upon. And I really wanted us to recognize that it is normal to feel emotional exhaustion based on work that you're doing in terms of working through your trauma, based on hashing over things, asking ourselves questions, why, working on healing mechanisms, thinking about the brain and the body, and trying to kind of find that space for healing and growth and peace. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about today. I thought it was quite relevant to have a topic that just kind of suggests like how can we reclaim our energy. So we're talking about healing trauma-based tiredness today, and even like recognizing it's a thing, isn't it? Because often we can feel exhausted maybe from a busyness of a week or a day, but there's a very different feeling when you feel emotionally exhausted. And the very first example I always think about is I mean, all of us had a different experience of COVID. We've all had the news in our faces. We had all different messages coming from different countries, different pressures, different heightened emotions, feelings. Some of those feelings probably came out after or maybe during the experience. I think that there was a natural sense that like there was a tiredness and an exhaustion that came from each day, didn't it? Sometimes I know some of us felt this lovely sense of energy because everything did stop. But for a lot of us, there was this emotional exhaustion. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that and link it to any of our other trauma-based tiredness, that sensation that we feel in the body, because I'm such a researcher on how trauma does actually store in our body as well as our thoughts. And so today, let's talk a little bit about that tiredness, that sensation. A lot of it comes from different chemicals that are running through the body. And we're looking at chemicals that are coming from like a stress response, something like cortisol. These sorts of chemicals are not the same as that oxytocin, dopamine that we're kind of looking for. That serotonin, all of those ones are those real chemicals that like send energy, positivity through the body. But equally on the other side, we have that sensation of the body becomes exhausted. And I once saw a really cool bit of research where there was a group of people who were asked to sit and think about a really, difficult time, maybe a time when they felt disappointed. And they were asked to sit in, that space in their head to think, close their eyes, get themselves into that space. And then what they did with all of those people is they asked them to bring their arm out. And they went around and they were able to like very easily like just touch their arm slightly and the arm would fall. It was like, you know, but then they asked that exact same sort of group to close their eyes, visualize, imagine that they've just finished climbing a mountain. They can feel the strength of their body. Then ask them to think about great achievements or something positive in their lives, beautiful place, holidays, things that made them feel like a sense of like confidence, or even imagining that they're that confident space that they want to be, the desired state. And when they asked them to do the same thing, they asked them to put their arms out, and the same kind of test was done, and they took their hand and they went to move the arms of those people, and they were stronger, they were harder to move. And actually, that's a physical reaction in the body, isn't it? Just by triggering those memories, maybe rehashing some of our negative thoughts, that sense of rumination where we go over and over some negative experience, we are sending again the exact same chemicals through the body that are making the muscles and that lovely, that energy that we would have had in a more positive state, that energy is being kind of drained. So I just wanted to start today kind of looking a little bit at this idea so that we can all kind of gauge that. Firstly, my biggest message is it is normal and human if, whether it's working on our trauma or in the thick of something that's traumatic, that it is very normal, or even the aftermath. I personally am somebody who's when I'm in it, I actually feel okay. I feel in control, but there's like a space after where I'm like, whoa, like feel like a zombie. And that in itself can be trauma-based tiredness or that emotional exhaustion. So yeah, that's where we're kind of begin. So as usual, I just want to say I'm really honored, yeah, to be here talking about this with you. And yeah, whether you are kind of listening because you also feel like tired, burnt out. There's another phrase for it, burnout. Maybe just longing for a little bit more energy, light, motivation, all of that like sense of like not just sitting on things, being more proactive. I just wanted to say that I see you, I suppose. I understand that kind of tiredness. And sometimes that's the tiredness, like sleep, it's not just sleep can fix, right? Because it's not the same as like those sleepless nights. Some of it comes from that, obviously, that emotional exhaustion. If we're sat ruminating, rethinking, in a space of fight, flight, or freeze, then obviously sometimes that affects our sleep, which affects so many other aspects of our lives. But I want you to know that if you are in a state of that trauma-based tiredness, it's not a laziness at all, and it's also not a weakness. It is just your body's reaction, and sometimes we don't give ourselves space to heal, some space to be in quiet and in stillness and in calm. We find the busyness of life can sometimes be actually quite comforting, because sitting in the stillness feels a little bit strange. But emotional exhaustion, it can be deep. It's like soul level fatigue, and born from surviving things that maybe you should never have had to. So today we're going to talk about that. My title is Reclaiming That Energy. So yeah, we're going to look at trauma-based tiredness. Yeah, we're going to look at what is emotional exhaustion, really. What does that look like? We'll explore what it is, why it happens, and most importantly, some really nice, cool tools that can maybe help you heal it or get you out of that funk, and move through it. Because healing is obviously possible. I love that message in everything. It is possible to get that back. It's possible to get you back, and that energy can absolutely return. And we all deserve to feel that space of being alive, and not just alive, but even like awake, energized, and free. So that's what I'm hoping for you through your program with Vaughn, and also working through some of these theories. So amazing. So let's kind of start with a little bit of clarity. So the definition, emotional exhaustion would be a chronic state of physical or emotional depletion, and that's resulting from prolonged stress, maybe emotional trauma, and overthinking. Yep, definitely been there and definitely feel that after certain events. It can affect your body, your brain, your thoughts, your relationships, and even some of your dreams. And some signs of emotional exhaustion are kind of still feeling really tired even after rest. So if you've been through an experience, but you're still feeling that like, oh, I just can't seem to get myself up, I'm really struggling to get through this. Sometimes that's, it could be anything that's triggering that. Maybe you haven't like been sleeping, but equally that when we're talking about emotional exhaustion, it often comes at a time when you're like, actually, I'm doing all the right things, but I'm still just feeling like I just need to stop. Sometimes emotional exhaustion can come from a state of like irritability, maybe this like sense of numbness or disconnection. That could also be like exhaustion, that point when you're like, I don't even know what I need, when I'm struggling to think clearly. I'm just a bit numb. And that could be an example of emotional exhaustion. Like I said earlier, actually, that trouble sleeping is one of the key areas actually that comes from trauma sometimes. It's not everybody's sort of sign, or waking up, rethinking, rehashing things. But yeah, that could be a sign of emotional exhaustion as well. Maybe your body is struggling to rest, and it is constantly in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that's something we need to work on, is to get the body into a calm place a little bit more often so that you're able to think a little bit with more clarity and maybe work through that exhaustion. Another sign is that sense of overthinking. Again, I know that so well, but overthinking or racing thoughts. Again, you have to imagine that your body is going through a lot in that moment because you are, your heart rate's going, the breath is often restricted, the body's often tense. And these thoughts racing through your body are generating all those chemicals that we were talking about. And what we're thinking about here is that your body can potentially physically be replaying the experience, and you might be feeling it. And what I wanted to say is it's normal if you're feeling that. And let's look at some tools to kind of break that down. Because after that experience, that overthinking, those racing thoughts, like you might be exhausted when you've not actually, we're not actually running a race, for example. It's just mentally we're overthinking, and it's enough to do it. And again, another few signs: low motivation, like we spoke about, self-doubt, shame. Shame is a big one. That guilt and shame and doubt, all of those feelings and emotions are really big ones. And I think it's important to recognize, like, if we're feeling that a lot, living a lot in that, we need to work through that a little bit and recognize it and have a little think. Brain fog and forgetfulness can absolutely be some, surefire signs of emotional exhaustion, especially if you are somebody who's naturally quite sharp. You naturally have most things are, come to you with clarity. It will make such difference. And in addition, you can sometimes feel just physically achy. You can physically feel those pains. That's another sign or symptom. And so if you do come from a trauma background, all of this sort of becomes magnified. And without realizing it, you're sat like, you ever hear the phrase like, "Oh, I just feel so emotionally drained"? That's what this potentially could be, and that it is a real thing. It's a phrase that's become part of our language. But what is it actually all about? And so let's talk a little bit about the neuroscience. Again, coming back to some of those keywords that you've looked at before, but bringing it into this fatigue. Kind of let's look at it in simple terms. When you've experienced trauma, we were learning a lot about the nervous system. And you could imagine if you are constantly in survival mode, then obviously your body is literally just waiting for that saber-toothed tiger to jump out at you. Could you imagine? You're just constantly waiting for something bad to happen, or you're constantly waiting for a point where you need to, fight, flight, run. You're sat there in this like waiting space that something, isn't great is going to come out and happen to us. And that, like I said, the entire body experiences that. And, kind of like, I want you to think a little bit about, you've got the amygdala, which I love to represent as that fire alarm. So imagine that you've got that fire alarm going in your amygdala. So that part of your brain is like going off. That's kind of telling you like, hey, ding, 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 ding. You've got a space where you're uncomfortable. It's unknown. Maybe you feel like this is dangerous. It might not be at all. Maybe there's nothing at all that's dangerous, but the fear of not knowing whether something's coming at you is creating that. We all have that experience. And that amygdala is like that fire alarm, whether it's quiet or whether it's really, really loud. Could you imagine like how exhausting that is? And that's this like hypervigilance, constantly scanning for danger, or scanning, to make sure that things are safe for us. And so it's important for us to recognize, because I always say that having the language, when you start to feel that state, I'm sure after you've been sat in a state of like fight or flight, you can start to recognize it in your body. You can start to recognize that maybe there's some hypervigilance. Maybe you're, ask yourself right now, is this actually a moment when like this saber-toothed tiger, or do I need to fully be in survival mode right now? And if the answer is no, then you can remind yourself that, hey, my amygdala is just overworking right now. I need to find a way through that. And I'll give you loads of tips and tricks. Or you can do the things that you've already learned with us, your breathing, your butterfly tapping, all of that stuff, and kind of go back to even the deep dive that I took you guys through last week. But there's so many things, that we're starting to learn about tapping into that. But we know that amygdala, imagine like that fire alarm's going off. Like, can you actually think straight? Like, could you? Can you actually like are you thinking straight? Is there like you can all of those signs of like emotional and tiredness lend itself to that feeling? You would genuinely start to feel irritable. You start to feel like you couldn't think straight. You start to be like overthinking things. You trying to constantly trying to figure out how to stop things. You'd feel that sense of exhaustion. You just want it to stop. And actually, when we're in that hypervigilance, we don't realize the intensity of that in the mind and the entire body. And then equally, we have our logical mind that is completely impaired, isn't it? And so when we're moving through that exhaustion, it's hard because you're working in overdrive trying to find the answers, or you continue to keep thinking a lot about a decision. You can't quite make a decision on something because you're in fight or flight. And so they always say, I love, I don't know whether this like helps you at all, but they always say like when I forget who it was, someone said like you make your best decisions, for example, like in the shower. You make your best decisions in those moments when you're actually doing something different, but the brain has a minute to calm down. Often you're not thinking, are you in the morning in the shower about like what the smell of your shower gel is? You're going through those motions, but often your brain is like thinking clearly about what your day looks like, what you need to get done, the things ahead of you. Sometimes you could be in that hypervigilance, but it's a really great place to start and think, okay, let me just calm that space. Often people say going on a holiday is way more than a holiday. It's because you actually often are able to walk away. You're not looking around your space thinking like, I need to do that job. I need to sort this job. You actually have the clarity and the space to turn everything off and think with clarity, and things come to you, and often I use that actually. I want you to think about like what kind of thing for you, what kind of place makes you feel calm. We need to find that space in an environment that makes you feel calm. And my first bit of advice is to find that when you feel like a decision is very difficult to make and you're just not making, it's just not coming to you. My best advice is to find that space and go there. So if you're lucky enough to live by a lovely spot in nature, beautiful. Great tip. Go for a walk in nature. It could even be like 5-10 minutes. It could be sitting on a log. It could be sitting by the water, taking a few deep breaths, smelling the sea air. But often just getting out, being hit a little bit with nature, trying to look around in a little bit of a mindful way, looking at like the leaves and the colors and the trees. Like it sounds silly, but taking your brain off of what you're in this hypervigilance about, getting yourself in nature, connecting, with being outside, just literally going for a walk can be the most powerful thing that you do. I personally it's not everybody's space, but I also really find a lot of peace. Like some people find in their garden. I love a hot bath. Sometimes when I'm overthinking something, I put some music on and I just go and have a nice hot bath. And I know that if I calm down, the answers will come to me. It sounds strange. But again, it's a space where I feel calm. It's often the end of the day, to be honest. I have little distraction and then I start to ask myself like, okay, what is the best answer to this dilemma, this thing that I'm overthinking? And my prefrontal cortex, like we were talking about, that neuroscience, my amygdala seems to calm down in those spaces, in those environments, in those places that feel safe for us. My prefrontal cortex, my logical mind, is no longer impaired, maybe by that trauma or that trigger that particular day. And then all of a sudden, I start to make a little bit more sense. But we also have the hippocampus, which is a really big part of this exhaustion. The hippocampus is like a space where our memory, it's called our memory processor. And that becomes really fogged by trauma stress. In terms of, the neuroscience and the background here in terms of that emotional exhaustion. And so you get a real sense here that like lots of things are happening, lots of things are are, not working in the order that they need to work until we can get our nervous system back on track, until we can kind of find it what we need. So my most important tip is find a space and environment. If there's something that you're ruminating on, something that you can't seem to let go of, or a decision that's feeling bigger than it is, maybe probably based on maybe a past decision, trauma, PTSD, all of these things normal that we experience based on, more challenging backgrounds and stories. It is really powerful to go into a safe space or just get yourself into nature or walk. Walking is super, super great because we start to move the body, and moving the body means that we're doing something different. The body, it's kind of like we distract ourselves a little bit by having to think about left foot in front of right, and we're moving. The more we move the body, the more we clear the mind. Some people find their best thinking on a treadmill, for example. The gym doesn't have to be your best friend, but it absolutely could be an outlet. Those sorts of things come to mind. And most importantly, in the module that I lead you through with Bond's program, there's a whole talk that I do on the aspect of the brain called the reticular activating system, or your RAS, and that is your brain's filter. And you have to remember, like, I don't even know whether we can actually keep track of like the hundreds of thousands of data and information that is coming at us in one day. And so our brain naturally needs to create some level of a filter, doesn't it? And what happens is it just gets stuck looking for threats if we've experienced something tough. And it keeps our focus on what's wrong rather than what's right. Often it's that like little bit of a bouncer. I'm not going to let these thoughts in, these thoughts in, because I'm not used to these ones. But my brain is telling me to let all of these kind of negative threats overwhelm in, because that's the habit that I'm used to. So we need to start thinking about, how can we retrain our filter so that our filter is letting less of that in and a little bit more of like, let me see some like positive aspects of the day, some lovely positive parts of my week. Let me see some great aspects about myself. And we need to start thinking about retraining that aspect of the brain. If our reticular activating system, this like filter, is totally filtered to negative, then that's all that our brain's going to see. But I do a whole talk on that in one of your modules on the reticular activating system. But what I want you to think about is that over time, this burns out your emotional battery if it's always just letting in those negative thoughts, and then it's exhausting trying to battle them back. So we have to just keep at it bit by bit, theory by theory, session by session, coaching by coaching, trying all of these new strategies. All of these things are going to work to reset what your reticular activating system is. And yeah, and they say, your brain isn't broken. You're not broken. It's just you've been in survival mode for too long, and your body is tired because it's always trying to protect you. And that's what emotional exhaustion really is. And I think that that's a really nice, powerful way to look at it, isn't it? It's just you've been in survival mode for so long. So let's find ways through it. I want to reference a little bit of Mel Robbins. She does some really, I've talked a little bit about her specifically in terms of her book called The Let Them Theory. She has a really great podcast as well. And she does lots of talks on different like little micro shifts that we can make in order to kind of get ourselves out of fatigue. So let me give you a few examples that I have really adopted from her. And yeah, some of her theories. So yeah, she's an American researcher, and she talks a lot about activation energy. And she says here that like whether you've been through trauma, specifically if you have, then it's going to be harder to find that like inside that intrinsic motivation to do things. And she says we all, like, myself included, we genuinely need to just get to grips. Like, you're never going to feel like it. Like, for whatever it is that's going to be good for us, or sometimes there's these things that you want to do, but then when you get to it, we're like, ugh. But she says, like, just accept the fact that like there's things you're just never going to feel like doing. She said she always wanted, like, she always wanted to be that person who got up and went for a walk in the morning and had a a cup of coffee and drank enough water in the day or whatever, she was like, you're never going to feel like it. And I loved that she kind of highlighted for me, like, yeah, do you know what? Like, no matter all the things, like I adore my family. I really enjoy my job, but there are moments when I'm like, oh, do you know what? Like, because the world has so many options, sometimes it's easy just to be like, yeah, I just actually want to skip that or do that later. Or I'm just going to go sit and, do this instead. So, or just go to bed. But she says, like, if you can accept, you're never going to feel like it. If this is a target or a goal or something that you're finding sometimes challenging to kind of get up, she said, we're not actually going to ever wake up magically motivated. And I was like, yeah, do you know what? Fair enough. There isn't a magic wand for this. And that actually, that tiredness, you got to remember, like, it's your tiredness, it's just being human. Remember all of these things, like none of this makes it, this just all of these things that we're experiencing based on trauma just makes us human. Your body's just doing its job trying to protect you. Um, but yeah, it's always telling you, like, just lay down, just keep scrolling on your phone, just hide, get stuck in Netflix. And that's not a bad thing. But she has this amazing 5-second rule that teaches us to kind of interrupt the cycle. So I'm gonna get you to do it with me. Or the next time you think like I really have this goal, I've been thinking about doing it for ages, try it. So think of one action that you want to take, but you never do. So an example, maybe you've been thinking about like you want to start walking. I don't know. Maybe you've been thinking about journaling a little bit. Like you think I want to just start just doing a little bit of writing. It doesn't have to be much. Mind mapping, just put whatever. Maybe it's stretching, maybe there's movement that you want to do. Whether it's just drinking water, more water in the day, taking care of your nutrition, getting up to eat something healthy, whatever. I don't know, but if there's like a healthy habit, maybe doing some, reading, listening to a podcast instead of scrolling, whatever it is, have a think about one small action that you really want to take. Yeah. So have a little think. And I genuinely do this, by the way. And then she says, when you're laying there, and as soon as you have like a thought, like, oh, I should get up now and do those things, she says, count backwards. And she genuinely, I'm finding that this is really working for me. So the backward count: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. Get up and do it. She said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get up and do it immediately. Don't let your mind talk you out of it. And if you start to get sidetracked, you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, get yourself back focused. And this could be as simple as like standing up and drinking some water. It could become like an act of rebellion against your trauma story because you're like getting out of that like funk, right? That exhaustion. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, up I go. I'm going to drink that water. So it doesn't have to be anything massive. Obviously, we know water is so good for our bodies and our brains and whatever. So I just use that as an example because it's forever on my list of things to do. And I'm finding that this is really helping me to kind of get myself up or wanting to wake up earlier and do a few things before my day starts with my children, whatever it is. Again, wanting to do a bit more reading or listening or whatever. This is a great way to just get up and move, get up and do something, get up and do a yoga class if that's something you want to think about. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to that class. Or I'm going to get up and I'm going to log on online and do it. So yeah, it's a tiny action, but actually creates a neurochemical shift, she says. You're reactivating the prefrontal cortex. We're getting some clarity. We're rebuilding trust with yourself, and we're continuing to like reset our RAS. So our RAS is starting to say that after you say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, that whatever it is that you're doing, your RAS is going, you can do it. Get up and do it. Versus like, no, you're just rest, do nothing. You're whatever. That our brain and our bodies want us to stop. So I want you to remember our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule and have a go. Genuinely have a go of it. Next time you're just feeling that like exhaustion, but there's something that you wanted to do. See if you can do it like today, this afternoon, right now. Pause the video. See if you can think like, this is what I really want to do. But I'm actually know that I'm going to sit and maybe flick through my phone instead, or I'm going to go, nothing wrong with phones and Netflix and numbing out. But how much time are we doing that compared to maybe taking on some really positive habits that would really be game changing for our lives, our brain, our body, you know, that there's time, time in our lives goes by quicker than you think. Just track the time. I don't know if not all of us might be using the phones that we have, but if you actually do use it, you can track the timing that you use it. And sometimes it's crazy to think that you've accessed that for 5 hours or something in a day. So can you shift that for something more positive, like in you know your body, your brain, that sort of thing. um, so yeah, amazing. Now, I wanted to show you, I come from a yoga teacher background, so nobody has to be a yoga teacher, or do yoga or be physically fit at all. But I wanted to show you a few movements that can move you in from like that trauma tiredness. So all you need to do is think about, I'm going to bring our hands up in front of us if that feels comfortable. We're going to lift our elbows up. We're going to just bring our elbows back. We're just going to lean forward. So I want you to imagine that the back is arching. You've got the chest leaning forward, the elbows coming back. That's great. So that is kind of like what we would call like a seated cow pose. And then what we want to do is the opposite. We want to bring the hands forward, maybe bring the hands and interlace them and reach out. So you've got like a big circle in front of you. And the opposite happens with the spine. So notice my spine is arching forward and kind of tucking under. Good. Inhale, open. Exhale, reach, close. Maybe draw the chin down. Inhale, open. Good. Exhale, close. Inhale, open. Exhale, close. Inhale, open. Exhale, close. And slowly bring the hands down. Give it a little shake. Good. We're going to do a twist. We're going to twist over to one side. So if you're sat on a chair, perfect. Or a sofa, just twist over to one side. Try and sit nice and tall in the spine. Good. And we're just going to breathe to the belly. Inhale. And breathe out. Inhale, coming back to center. Let's twist the other direction. Doesn't have to be deep. Could be really small. Breath to belly. Inhale and exhale. And all of that is actually, the breath is going deeper because we're twisting. The breath is coming into that, like moving a little bit of our internal organs, which is really good. Coming back to center, and you're starting to energize the body. You're getting energy through that body. And the next one is just taking some really nice big shoulder rolls. Let's take those big circles. Let's get ourselves into that space where we're really trying to just let go and then roll forward and back. Good. 3, 2, and 1. Awesome. Little shake out, shake it out, up to the side. It might feel silly, but sometimes just moving your body, energizing the body, is great. Like you can stand up, like I said, move, a little bit more energetically, take a walk around a room, but that is all great ways to kind of shake out that emotional exhaustion. I don't know about you, but I actually feel like right now I've got, even like mid talk with you, I'm like feeling like a little sense of energy just from doing that. And again, it's because your body's opening and expanding, and breath and energy is moving through you. In yoga, they call the breath pranayama. And pranayama is meant to be, energy moving through the body. It is our breath. It's being alive. So take that awesome breath. I was also taught in my yoga teacher training that we have 2 different ways that we can use breath to shift our energy. And maybe it's something you could try depending on, your triggers, if breathing, personally, sometimes breathing isn't what I go to first because I do have some asthma, but often it helps my asthma and my energy. So just be aware, it's just something to try. But the calming breath, which I've kind of gone over quite a bit, is slow exhalation. It's this like breathing in and then breathing out really slow. That is going to calm and energize our body. It's going to calm the body but not energize it. So a slow exhalation is often a great way to calm the nervous system and to kind of bring in a little bit less of the amygdala response. But also, if you have a really slow inhalation and a short exhalation, you can start to bring a little bit of energy to the brain and body. So it doesn't create like panic, but that breath and that control can sometimes give you a little bit of a boost. Let us try. So we're going to breathe in a little slower and let it out. Breathing in, let it out. Breathing in, let it out. Breathing in, let it out. Good. Maybe you feel a bit lightheaded, but often that sigh, that quick exhalation, you might think, oh, I feel a bit more awake, a little bit more lightheaded. So it's different for everybody. Everyone's going to have a different experience of that, but you might find one of those breaths, whether it's calming the nervous system is what you need to get into clear headspace and calm your body, or whether you want a little bit more of an energetic energy with the quick exhalation, it might make a really nice shift for you. Because as per usual, like not only does our trauma store obviously in our thoughts and in our thinking and create limiting beliefs as we move through, but it does physically store in the body. There's such a tightness. If you have a little bit of extra money going for a massage, I also think that if you believe in holistic healing, it's not for everybody, but Reiki can be something that's very calming in terms of like balancing out your energy centers. If you do believe in that, some people see them as more like metaphors, or Reiki is not necessarily a route that they would want to take. But I personally would advocate looking into these modalities because if I'm really honest, I do think that like everybody needs to find, you'll find it in this course and you'll also find it in your own research, but find your toolkit. What works for you? What works for your body to beat that tiredness, to get you out of fight or flight so the body can actually rest for a little while. That's what we're looking for. Is that space. So I think that that's a great tip. I think, moving the body, finding some breath, either way, your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 should be a really great little takeaways as we move through this kind of emotional fatigue or being that draining feeling. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the grounding technique. Overthinking can be exhausting. So if you haven't already, I'm just going to go through it one more time, but there's like it's going through your senses. So maybe you can do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in a different way. What are 5 things you can see? So if you're feeling overwhelmed or in panic or in fight or flight, and your body's feeling exhausted and you can't get out of that feeling, kind of looking at 5 things you see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear. You can either write them down or just make a note, maybe on your phone, or just note them in your head once you're good at it. 2 things that you can smell. Maybe you just can't smell anything, which is fine. Maybe you've got a drink in front of you, you can have a smell of that, but just see if you can kind of gain that sensation. And 1 thing that you're grateful for is a really nice one, because that starts to bring you back. That is present moment thinking, and it tries to take us out of that like sense of rumination. And it just helps us to kind of reclaim our attention from our RAS filter. And it tells your brain like we're safe and we're here. And that movement that we talked about, every time you move gently, you tell your nervous system it's safe now. So we're always training the brain and the body to remind itself that at moments when we are thinking that we're not safe, the body's in that like state, that actually there's lots in there that could help us to support us in knowing that we are okay, we can move through in a space of calmness. Another one is like a really cool it's a journaling activity. Again, I do advocate for trying to write things down, but it's super easy. You can just call it your energy audit. And maybe you do 2 quick columns. One just says on the left side, what drains me and what is draining me right now. And on the right side, what energizes me, even a little bit, even the smallest bit, what's draining me, what's energizing me. So let me give you an example. I put what drains me is I put on that side comparing myself to others online. Sometimes I don't do it consciously, but like flicking through, there's this like, oh, I actually am looking at other people's lives. I'm, subconsciously, but what energizes me personally might not be the same for you, but what energizes me, and I don't do it nearly enough, but like actually doing some journaling journaling, like grabbing a pen and like just writing about my day. Like I often, anytime I start journaling personally, I start for like 1 minute and I think I'll just do 1 minute. I'll just do 30 seconds. I'll just write one word and I end up going on for way longer. So remember, journaling doesn't have to be a very long-winded task. It could just be, I'm just going to get a pen and paper here and just figure something out. But if something else energizes you, put that on your list. It doesn't have to be what I've put. Maybe what drains me as well is like saying yes to everything and everyone. That's something that drains me. Like sometimes I'm giving everything to my children and my family and my work and all of these things that I forget sometimes, like to take care of myself. But what energizes me in terms of taking care of me is those things I mentioned earlier, like a hot bath that actually calming my nervous system energizes me. A yoga class, I'm teaching a yoga class, being by the seaside, going for a walk in nature, all of these things. So listing your things, that what drains you, what's energizing you, and coming back to it once in a while, doing it again on another moment when you're just feeling that drainingness, and then choosing to maybe try 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do one of my energize me things, have a go of it. And just see if you can kind of make that happen within your day. So yeah, really nice. I think that that's really easy, even if it's a quick task and you just kind of think of one thing draining you, one thing that energizes you, or you can go for it and just write. But it's a nice thought, or can do on your phone really quickly. Amazing. Yeah, I really like that. And finally, yeah, I just think there's so much in this, but I do think that you can get that energy back in so many ways. And I wanted to say like you need to pat yourself on the back, like doing this work can get your energy back, but don't be if you are still feeling tired as you're going through these processes, talking about these things that have been worrying you, talking about trauma, it is normal to feel a sensation of tiredness. It is normal, but just see if you can kind of find some things, find an environment, find a route out, maybe even access a bit of meditation if it's something like that you're trying out. Laying there is actually sometimes like trying not to think about anything but your body, what it is that you want, where it is that you need to be. And so I've got a really lovely quote today. And it's actually anonymous, but I thought it was a really beautiful one just to reflect on our topic today. And it says, you don't need to be fully healed to start living again. You only need to believe you're worthy of healing. And I think that that's really awesome. If we can start fitting in our brains, maybe that is your new affirmation. I am worthy of this healing. I am worthy of this energy again. I am worthy of, my desired state. All of that is great stuff to be saying. We're resetting our RAS, our nervous system, but you don't have to be fully healed to really start living again. It's always a process. I feel like my process, despite being like, quite well read, educated, masters in these topics, and working in this area, I know my journey is still going, and I revel in the fact that, that I'm trying my best to believe that just like you guys, I might not be there totally yet, and things are going to come up in my life, but I am worthy of healing and I'm working in that direction, and that changing that mindset has been really healthy. And yeah, I think that another one is like you have survived 100% of your worst days, and that makes you unstoppable. So just keep going, keep breathing, keep fighting for that energy. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom. See if you can get yourself going and do that little neuro science hack. And Mel Robbins, again, I've just kind of referenced her today, but she says the comeback is always stronger than the setback, which is really nice. And yeah, I just have a little, yeah, I just wanted to say, like, you've got this. And like I said, from what we've been through, whether you're feeling that exhaustion or you have felt it or you might feel it in future, I want you to just remember, like, one, that you're human, two, that you are absolutely, this is not something that you're going to have to experience forever. You are not broken. You are in the process of healing. And even though trauma may have taught your body that you need to stay in survival mode, you are now learning how to find that calmness and that peace so that you can start kind of thriving one breath, one movement, one moment at a time. Energy doesn't kind of return through force, it returns through safety, through slowness, and through lots of self-compassion and kindness to yourself. And I want you to remember that, keep patting yourself on the back for every step. You really have got this. We're kind of just, we're not chasing an energy, we're just trying to invite it back home, trying to get that you back, get that sparkle back that you once had, or that zest for life. So yeah, as always, thank you for tuning into the Wellbeing Wednesdays. I'm back actually with a deep dive for bond coming up in the next few weeks, so we will catch you there. And I'm always happy for any comments, as always. You can make them at the bottom. But I wish you a restful, joyful, vibrant week. And I really hope that some of this information has helped you realize that, like, it's all okay. You've got this. Just keep working, keep trying new things to get that lovely little zest back. All right, peace and love, team. We'll see you very soon.